the ships has many faces, brush and shoulders with the stars. Where strangers take your by the hand and welcome you to Wonderland from beneath their Panmas. Catch up, you're gonna drinks are free. Fun and sunshine, there's enough for everyone. All that's missing in the sea. But don't worry, you can sometimes cast away and love as snake and kissing jamais senti coisa igual. Tempestade que chegou mansa surpreendendo-me, e tanto esse teu doce tabu. Você me dá doce tabu, por isso eu te amo, meu bem. Aí você me dá doce tabu, é demais pra mim. Grande é teu coração, sei que você é o melhor pra mim. Eu sei, cada dia é Natal, e cada noite ano novo é com você, com você, com você. Continuarás a me amar, continuarás a cultivar o melhor de mim. I see you, you see me. Watch you blow in the lines when you're making a scene. Oh girl, you gotta know what my head overlooks, what senses will show to my heart. When it's watching for lies, you can't escape my private eyes. They're watching you, they see your every move. Private eyes are watching you. Private eyes, they're watching you, watching you, watching you.
Good afternoon to you all. Please take a seat, grab a seat, and we can actually start this conversation for this new edition of the European Film Forum. So welcome to this new edition here at the Berlinale. We're going to take a closer look today at subtitling and dubbing because, of course, they're essential components to the circulation of European works. They're key to reach wider and younger audiences, following an interesting and growing trend and demand for non-national content. But still, if we do follow the money, subtitling and dubbing still implies cost because they're the very same for any given language, which do impact on the way that works do travel and are being made available on any platform, device, or screen. So, yet interesting technologies have emerged. So, how can we make the most of it? That's one of the questions we'll tackle. And of course, our guests, all along panels and interview, will give a solution from what they've been experiencing in this very side of the industry. Speaking of dubbing, actually, translation are available both in English, French, and German. So if you feel like you need an headset, just go to the back of the room and you can grab one. But first, to open officially this very session here in Berlin, please join me in welcoming Commissioner Maria Gabriel.
Merci beaucoup Marjorie, c'est toujours un plaisir de vous voir, de vous avoir parmi nous. Madame Kammerevert, chers Petra, mesdames et messieurs, tout d'abord, je voudrais vous remercier.
I'm very happy.
Merci d'abord de...
I would first to extend my great thanks to you I would like to thank you for what in your everyday lives you do at work and thank you for the opportunity to address you, to speak to you. Thanks for giving me the opportunity. That's a very valuable one in two respects. You know, I have the opportunity to show that we, as the political decision makers, do take and will take very concrete steps. This industry, after all, is part of a long-term societal project. I'm very happy and I'm also very proud that I can describe concrete progress in various aspects. These are things where even last year I had made promises, like last year round, I entered into a commitment. And above all, I'd like to talk with you about the progress that we have attained for a more human and a more just information society and digital society to be created. So we're talking about subtitling, we're talking about dubbing of European works of art, works of film. That gives me the opportunity to talk about multilingualism with you and to share thoughts with you about these steps that yet have to be attained to realize further goals. So let me say that right now in the modern era now, we have enormous changes. We have other phenomena such as migration and globalization. And one of the important steps is not maybe to promote innovation. No, there's a much bigger challenge around you. This is for us to shape our future society. We have to devise a model for this future society. We have to select it and design it. It's a society which also protects children, minorities, a society where together you try to set standards and objectives to act against injustice, a society which takes the right to free information serious and defends it against manipulation tendencies. That's a sort of a new fight, a new combat. And this sheds light, not least, on, let me say, the Jean Monnet era. He's one of the founders of Europe, and he said that the European construction was not meant to get states together, but rather people, men and women inside Europe. This is the challenge. This is what we should all gear our challenges to get people closer together. Men and women who today become much more autonomous, much more independent, not least thanks to digital progress. And this is why we should also find common aspects amongst us. And I'm firmly convinced against this backdrop that we're having three important pillars: culture, education, and digital economy. These are keys to the mastering and shaping the digital future. These are not pure sectors. No, these are the main pillars, the main foundations: cultural education, digital matters. They give people the opportunity to participate in a better society, a society that's based on basic values. Let's remember that the basic values were inherited from the Age of Enlightenment, not least since I've taken over the function as EU Commissioner. I have been striving all the time for encompassing topics which mirror my conviction. Culture is a lever, also the audiovisual sector that I concentrate on. We have to be more robust in this development. We have to come up with a joint project based on values that bring us together, which we share. This is why I'd like to name three aspects of the work of the EU Commission that I find are particularly important for our future now. So for one, the Creative Europe program and the media sub-program and the European film works. Let me begin with the media program. I know this is very dear to your hearts, and I thank you most warmly also that you've turned this venture into a real success story. It's really a tremendous outcome. I'm sharing my considerations about that largely with yours. So we want to defend European cinema. It's an efficient program. Often you tend to having programs as an outstanding program. This here is one, indeed. Look at the multiplier effects that it can develop. This way we fund European cinema, European works of film, and at the same time we try at arriving at a single European market for the AV content for audiovisual matters. We will outline a new Creative Europe program. It will have a sufficient budget, and linguistic and cultural diversity is to be promoted further this way, and we support the competitiveness of European audiovisual sector. We know that these two aspects are inextricably connected. We need a strong European audiovisual sector in economic terms, so it's got to be in a position to train talents, to keep these talents on board, so that we will be in a position to have top quality works of film that mirror our cultural diversity in Europe. Yes, we do have covered an enormous stretch of the way. Think of the EU Commission proposals for the multi-year financial budget. This is an increase of 30% inside that couple of years in the multi-year financial framework. It's terrific. It's a wonderful outcome. It's not easy to get the consent for raising the budget. The multi-year program, therefore, is in a very much better financial position and bargaining position. Well, Kamerevert will be addressing you. She supports me. She's here, and I remain optimistic that legislators will furthermore implement this test so that the sub-program media largely will shape the structure for our industry. It will be a catalyst function that it enjoys for promoting the talents in the sector. I'm quite optimistic. It's about the further development of talents, the capacities in the sector, so that the European AV sector is in the position to cooperate, to open up new markets, and this way also to distribute European works of film so that they can travel outside Europe. The European Parliament supports us in so doing, and I would also be very grateful to you. I would appreciate if you that are gathered here, you would take that into the European member states, and the venture needs to be brought forward for the multi-year program to be truly enjoying a good future. Now, there is another example that I would like to sketch in this context, the development of a new European film database. This is a concrete program, a venture which is to reach out to people, to get them together more and closer on the basis of the European cultural heritage of cinema. This is a database, and in this respect we have numbers and statistics that are quite convincing, and we will work further towards the idea of European film database. I mean, there's enormous film stocks in Europe, over 18,000 within 2 years that were produced here in Europe in recent years. But we know what major challenges there are ahead of us. Many of these films do not get to be offered, do not get to be distributed at all, I'm afraid to say. But I'm positive that we will do everything in our power, and will need to do so, for this cultural heritage in film to be defended properly, so that the distribution of film has to be furthered and advanced. This means we have to have an online instrument, a tool, a database, an inventory, where all the video-on-demand films are shared, are listed, that you can have access to. This is the target. The European Film Database has this very goal. We want all the experts of the industry to obtain information all the time about the current state of distribution of certain films in Europe. Also, whether certain films do not get distributed elsewhere. I can tell you that we're about to go into a new stage in mid-April. Together with the European Audiovisual Information Agency, we will have a new, better version of the European Film Database. It will be available for everybody. It can be accessed in this overall context. Let me thank the Observatory most warmly, but also thank all the professionals and the organizations and associations that have supported me in doing so. I thank the platforms themselves, the video-on-demand services likewise. They consented to cooperate with us so that we can build that database. It's taken fewer than 8 months, just 8 months. We normally take that long for an idea to be realized practically. I'm fully aware of the fact that certainly this is due to your efforts, your ideas, your commitment and your engagement for that project to have flourished, for it to be a permanent success. And I hope that the joint efforts to support the project will carry on so that the film database can become a lasting success. And another point that is important to us is what's the current state regarding the European legal framework. After all, this is one of the competencies of the European Commission, the regulation to subsidize European film works. There is concrete progress in legislative aspects, some of it, but it needs cultural diversity. This is one goal. Over 60 initiatives since 2015 got introduced. Their purpose has been for cross-border obstacles to be overcome and for the present fragmentation to be dissolved so that you have better access to online programs, so that our cultural creators, our entrepreneurs have the opportunity to develop better in this digital world that we're living in. And this is also part and parcel of the work, part of the goal of the digital single market is one of our goals. So we have managed, indeed, for EU directive on media services to be reformed. We connected with it the intention to have a balanced regulatory environment in the media sector. This also applies to video sharing platforms, by the way. And today's purpose is for it to be implemented in concrete. So we want to find out how the new regulatory framework makes it possible for the European audiovisual sector, for instance, protecting minors, to improve the protection of minors. That's very dear to the also act against hate speech accordingly. This way, at the same time, we wish to promote European works of film better. I think this is a great piece of progress that we've reached. We have experienced great support for it. One of our rapporteurs from Kamerevert, thank you. European Parliament gave us a lot of support. We have a 30% ratio of European works of film on the video of demand platforms, 30% European content on the platforms. We have achieved that. Some would say an obligation. Well, I would rather say, well, the platforms are obliged in a way, morally obliged, to focus European works more and better. They wanted that, and we have achieved that with 30%. If you have the EU regulatory framework, it's important to implement it. We feel we are opening up many opportunities for the member states, so that the member states virtually can oblige the platforms to financially contribute to works of cinema, to the production and the distribution of film, of feature films. And this not only depends on regulation, of course, and legislation. No, it also depends on the concrete implementation, the foundations of the realization. What are the foundations? We want to entertain the dialogue with the stakeholders further. We want to carry on. We have resolved upon new rules, third cap. We know what the position is, what the target is. More citizens in the European Union in everyday life are to have access to more radio and TV shows, also of other European Union countries. We have the figures at hand. 41% of EU citizens watch television online. 20 million of those spectators, of those viewers, live in a different country than the emitting country where the production comes from. So that is to say, the South Cap Directive, that has to do with copyright, of course, closely. Let me not ignore that this is a very decisive phase in designing that. Over the next 3 days, even, it will be decided over the next 3 months, rather. We, myself and my team, have been very committed, and we're not letting go for copyright to be improved further, to be strengthened further, to pay tribute to the situation of the creators in the industry. They must have remuneration, just remuneration for their works. It's about giving citizens better access. That is true of teachers, of researchers, for instance. I think it's a just fight that I am waging. I will carry on this way. I think it's a very conclusive battle. It fully matches what we're striving for. After all, we want a societal model to be shaped. We do that on the basis of our canon of values, the European values. Over the next 2 or 3 days, there will be a further development. We should grab that opportunity indeed. We should prove that the European political decision-making process does not fall short through disinformation campaigns, and it cannot be prevented. Copyright owners are big actors. They want to defend their business models with this disinformation, which is unjust, which is unfair vis-à-vis the cultural creators, vis-à-vis the artists in the industry. So virtually, day by day, we use our powers and our strength to talk with the legislator to improve copyright. The EU Commission, in particular, wants to bring about a consensus between the stakeholders. But we always pursue the general welfare, the general interest of the public. A third point that I'd like to share with you today. In my introductory remarks, I broached it. That is multilingualism. Multilingualism is, so to speak, the centerpiece, the linchpin of cultural diversity and of the future digital single market. Getting people together, men and women, with the help of culture is simply not just sufficient to say that artistic work gets distributed, gets circulated. It's got to be available. You have to be able to get access, and you have to be able to understand that. As Nelson Mandela said, talking with a person in a language that he understands, it goes to his mind, he will understand, but it's better to reach out to the heart when speaking to a person in his language or her language. The work of subtitling with the help of new technology is a fantastic opportunity to really reach out for that aim. Multilingualism in Europe is to be retained. We want to turn that into cultural benefit. If it is an economic benefit likewise, then we will give more access to works of art in other languages. We will facilitate that. This is decisive for societal cohesion. Against this background, I would say that Europe should be more active. It must be. Europe must be leading, really, in the use of automated translation programs in this industry. The European Union strengthens the research and development for new innovative solutions to be developed, and we should reap the entire potential that the EU has. Over the next years and decades, as often said, the European Commission will invest more. They invest 200 million euros into new technologies in the sphere of automated translation. Also, speech recognition is included, multilingual programs in particular. This is where we bank on languages which digitally are less available or are less on offer these days. Again, we have made progress. Yes, we have results. This is due to the financing, the funding that the Union has provided through the European Guarantee Facility. Over 400 such databases have been developed multilingual, available for the public. And since last November, all European management and government and authorities have access to the automated translation tool. Within 24 hours, this is possible for interplay between authorities and EU citizens to be improved. But I think we'll need to do more in the future, because language is the biggest obstacle that there is towards promoting a digital single market. This is why I feel it's important to give some thought to it, like how concrete projects can be employed with a massive and bigger mobilization of people with more financial funding, how this way we can make it easier for companies and citizens throughout Europe to access these new technologies, to use them in order to translate their own texts, while their personal interests and privacy are protected and are maintained. Next budget of the European Union plans for a research program to pay tribute to this field, but also the rollout, the implementation is material. We're always good in theory. Sure, we're excellent in developing prototypes, but, you know, Now comes the moment where we have to give the funding to concretely implement it so that each EU citizen, all companies and enterprises can reap the benefits from the new technologies so that they can address those. Well, at short notice, it will likewise be relevant to experiment with the new technologies so we can see the responses from the public, from the users, so we can measure their responses. We know that this brings about advantages for the filmmakers and also for the public, for the cinema goer, but the purpose remains to get access to AV content, to improve that content access. We also want film producers to go beyond their national borders in their own philosophies, in their own thinking. As a matter of subtitling companies and dubbing companies to receive more support. We want to have pilot projects that the European Parliament has demanded, has called for. We want to facilitate access to subtitling technologies. I think now is the time. The time has come for a more coherent, more conclusive approach to be developed. So let's not just have fragmented initiatives. That shall not do for the future. The use of such initiatives rather should be more convincing and should be proven more directly. All of that needs to be more coherent, more conclusive, as I say. So we should go from word to deed. To sum it up, let me again convey one of my convictions. We are entering a phase, I'm convinced of that, that will be decisive for whether Europe will be leading in the new digital world, whether Europe will be in a position to shape a digital society that remains true to our values, or else whether Europe once and for all will be outdated, will be overtaken, cannot master the changes that are coming. I am convinced Europe will have to play a decisive role. Europe will play a decisive role because it is a catalyst. It enjoys that catalyst function. This is to say that we need to exhaust the potential to make it work in concrete. We have to bundle our forces in implementing concrete projects. For instance, the digital single market. Europe facing the digital market shall be leading in multilingualism. We're not only a catalyst, Europe can also take this leading role, a role model, epitomizing that innovation goes hand in hand with the true values, our underlying values and rights. Europe is a driving force for change. Europe can throw all its weight into the scales to also claim for regional interests against the internet giants. We dare to do it in certain fields. And we have to carry on this way, I must say, to do it further on to show that our approach is a holistic one. It is holistic, the way we pursue this angle. Actually, we not only want to have target measures to sort out one or another problem. No, it has to be holistic. It is hard to keep the balance at times, that's true, between innovation but also responsibility on the other hand. Europe can provide added value in digital economy. Europe is in a position to do so. Now, well, the matter is to take pioneering decisions for the future. We need to wonder and ask ourselves the following. What perspectives will future generations take on our actions and measures today? Will future generations say about us looking back, oh yes, they did justice to the challenge? What will they say? I don't know how you feel about it, but I would want the future generations to be proud of us. Future generations should see us as those that manage the transition successfully. So the best of what we developed was used. At the same time, on the basis of that, we lived up to the challenge, the digital challenges, courageously. And we must have managed to successfully implement this European work. Of course, it also depends on what you say, the experts say, from your own industries, what you contribute. It's a wonderful industry, your industry, and we are guided by it. myself and my team are guided by your industry. We know it's not an easy task to fulfill. You may imagine what we do is not easy either. We have to shape a digital community which lives up to our strategic interests, but which also does justice to our own values and powers. Let me repeat, I am firmly convinced that we'll be successful only where culture, education, and digital industry are the linchpin of our European project. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Gabriel, and seems to be an hectic kind of 3 days to go, so we'll definitely release you from your duty on stage. Now, let's give the floor, Ashley, to a member of the European Parliament, Petra Kamerevert.
Ja, sehr geehrte Kommissarin Gabriel, liebe Maria, sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, liebe Freundinnen und Freunde des Films. Seit den Anfängen der
since the beginnings of subtitling as titles in film with the words, it has been a long way. Subtitles can be found today on some or the other of the websites. You can switch it on using one click or switch it off, and you can usually also select between different languages. However, we have not reached a point yet where our goals have been achieved, because the fact that the European film, with its international conveying, can still not compete with the US American film. The reason is that we have too little investment and too little use of dubbing and subtitling, and we invest too little. The European multi-language environment is a treasure, but it's also an obstacle when it comes to distributing audiovisual and cinematographic content in the European context. But subtitling can help to bridge these gaps, and it can offer new opportunities, larger markets, and larger audiences to our creative teams. Well, you will not always applaud this, but in Netflix, I see a very strong example of how this is possible. One of the reasons for that major success of that streaming service is also the fact that they prepare the entire content with subtitles in as many languages as possible. Netflix itself sees its success and the opportunity to expand in this preparation of content. Although we may criticize lots of aspects pertaining to this online service, but we can still learn one thing from Netflix and its services: the fact that subtitling and dubbing translations are the most effective means and tool to offer films and other cultural works to a large and broad audience. Alongside economic motivations, there are also other very practical and diverse and some even societal reasons that speak in favor of investing more effort in subtitling and dubbing of creative European works, and thus making them accessible to a larger audience. It's not only the slogan of the EU to be united in diversity and the multicultural and language diversity, which is the objective of our European policy. It's part of our Charter of Fundamental Rights, which also offers access to information and education as a fundamental right of every citizen. This can also be seen as one of the reasons to make a larger effort when it comes to dubbing and subtitling audiovisual works in a much larger scale. In many countries, in particular in Germany, dubbing of films and series is still very popular today. Sometimes it's even impossible to find movies in their original version in our cinemas and art house venues. No one in Germany goes to the movies to read, and when it comes to TV, the situation is exactly the same. And I'm very open in admitting that even I have problems going to movie works that have been subtitled. In other countries and member states of the EU, that's something that is taken for granted. The subtitling versus dubbing, or dubbing versus subtitling shows some weaknesses. It's impossible to understand jokes and specialties from one language and translate them one-to-one into a different language, and then to also come to close lip services when it comes to the actors. That is much easier when you translate just the general meaning of something. Subtitles also enable us to judge the performance of actors exactly in the very way it was intended by the creative staff. Series and movies keep their originality and their credibility by using subtitles. When you look at the particular features of voice and the artist's expression, all that gets lost in dubbing and may even have an unintended effect on the audience. Just imagine a film where different languages are spoken. All of these particular features may get completely lost when we dub the film. Alongside artistic aspects, keeping the original language of the film or movie is also a question related to identity. Each and every language and dialect are, in the end, carriers of cultural memory, cultural heritage, and a particular cultural expression. Languages make statements regarding political, cultural, and societal aspects related to a society, no matter how large or how small that community is. Languages, therefore, do not only serve the purpose of enabling communication, now they stand also for the cultural heritage of humankind. In Europe, cultural and language diversity also mirrors our cultural diversity. It creates our European identity and fosters the living together of the different peoples in a harmonious way. Therefore, the subtitling of audiovisual works can contribute largely to the intercultural exchange, and much better so than dubbing, because the identity creative feature of language is not getting lost. Subtitling of audiovisual content would also foster an additional aspect, which is cultural and informational participation, which applies in particular to people with hearing disabilities and those people who do not master foreign languages. Those that already do have language skills can extend them thanks to subtitling. Let me give you an example from my everyday work. In the Dutch-speaking part of Belgium, people always find films and series on TV and in movie centers that are subtitled. That has a particular effect regarding their own language skills. That is something that I find in the plenary sessions of the parliament, but also in shops and in the restaurants of the capital of Europe, in Brussels. In that respect, when focusing more on subtitling of audiovisual pieces of art, we can also achieve a better result in our language diversity and language diversity in Europe. That would be a secondary positive aspect. As you can see and hear, the list of reasons for focusing more on subtitling of audiovisual content is very long and rich. That is why we absolutely need to stop seeing subtitling and barrier-freeness of series and movies as a compulsory task and understand much better which opportunities this may have. It's in the best interest of both the creatives, policymakers, and the audiences. The European Parliament, and in particular the Committee for Culture and Education, that I'm the president or the chair of, have understood that and have not missed any opportunity to stress how important subtitles are when it comes to disseminating European audiovisual contents across Europe and abroad. That is why we also want to revise the program of Creative Europe, which in the past, but also in the future, does see the subtitling of films and series as an important task for our funding efforts. And let me give you two additional examples that I think are particularly important. One is Arte. We foster a pilot project in Arte where broadcasts on Arte TV are available in 7 different subtitled versions on TV. I think that's an exceptionally positive example, and Deutsche Welle together with France Monde works on a similar project with similar intentions, and I think both projects are guiding us into the future. The regulation on the audiovisual media services, the Commissioner already mentioned it. Last year we created a legal frame which supports the dissemination of European audiovisual works with a share of 30% regarding the catalogues of measures. For the industry, this is going to be a reason to provide versions in different languages in their catalogues and also use investments in the different tools to provide these versions. Well, it is no use just having catalogs and not make sure at the same time that a large share of the audience understands the different visions. With the preparatory measures regarding the subtitling of cultural works and spreading it across Europe, we've also launched innovative strategies for the provision of subtitled version that are being tested. And we want to disseminate them across borders. This goes for different cultural contents and facilitate the dissemination. And let me not forget the Lux Film Award of the European Parliament, which last year was granted for the 12th time. The finalists and shortlisted versions are made available in 24 different synchronized or subtitle language versions across Europe, and the winner of the award will also get the funding for making these different films available for people with hearing impairments. The subtitling of films contributes to cultural diversity and the creativity of the European cinema. It helps to make European audiovisual works accessible to a larger audience and disseminate them across language and national borders. It is of particular importance that the necessary measures have been taken to achieve these objectives, because it takes a long time to create subtitles, and of course it leads to additional costs, which in particular for smaller studios and producers this may be an obstacle. Many of the films produced within the EU can not even now cover their production costs. New and digital technologies, in particular automated speech recognition and artificial intelligence, may be the levers to help us reduce costs and production time when it comes to subtitling. And we can already see how impressively good some of the US-American companies and industries recognize our voices in everyday life already today. The different language recognition systems do not suffice to be really efficient for language recognition. The local norms that have developed over time and human humor cannot that easily be interpreted and translated into a different language by only using automated translation tools without using human intelligence. Therefore, I'm very curious to participate in the different discussion rounds this afternoon that will hopefully give us outlooks into new ways of disseminating translated contents and help us to understand much better where we may need to get back into reality, because digitalization cannot solve every single problem in a satisfactory way, not even the one to overcome language barriers. But the opportunities that it should give us, in spite of its limited scope, should be used to the full. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Kamaravat. So let me just remind you that from now on, the panel's interview will be held in English, but if you still need a translation headset, please just go at the bottom of the room and pick up one. Translation is definitely available in German, French, and English, though. Also, if you do have a question or reaction to our upcoming guests, please just, keep it in mind, and you'll have the opportunity to directly ask your question by the very end of every single segment. Hostesses and hostess will actually bring you a mic over if you need one to express yourself. So now, without further ado, let's turn to a producer who had to tackle the dubbing and subtitling questions to turn our shows into various international and global successes. How did she use them as drivers to have My Brilliant Friend or The Young Pop travel to various countries? Please join me in welcoming Karine Hanel. Good afternoon to you, Karine. It's a real pleasure to have you on stage here at the European Film Forum. First, before we actually do start this conversation, just a few facts and figures as reminders. Into how many languages were The Young Pop or My Brilliant Friend subtitled or dubbed?
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's very nice to see that this is such a hot topic. It's a lot of people here. I don't have actually the exact numbers, but I was looking through like a sales catalog from our distributor, and it says that both series have been sold to approximately 150 territories, which means pretty much the whole world. Yeah. And the dubbing, I would guess that the series have been dubbed in more or less 10 different languages, and in the rest subtitled.
Which is still a lot and a huge success, I guess. So if we actually do come back to the very example of My Brilliant Friend, you actually chose to produce and actually to film the entire show in the dialect from Naples, from Napoli, and means that you also had to dub it or subtitle it in Italian, even for the Italian market. So how challenging is it?
Well, I don't know if everyone knows that, but in Italy, the dialects are very different from the Italian, common language. And we wanted to create a product that was as true as possible to Ferrante's novels. And that was kind of one of the main first decisions that we took. We keep it true to the novels, seeing also the success they've had. And we were a little bit afraid at a certain point when we started discussing the project with HBO, because we thought they were going to insist on having it in English. But in the end, they were happy to do it as we wanted. So in the end, we have produced Italian-speaking with Neapolitan dialects. And we have subtitled, not dubbed, the parts where the Neapolitan dialect is spoken.
Which is really interesting in the way that you're there picking up a trend on new usage when it comes to viewers. So it's, of course, from your perspective, a reason to be really coherent with the novel and the editorial part of it. But still, now we're seeing wider audiences trying to trying to actually watch content in the original language. And HBO has been well known, especially HBO Europe, for bringing, non-national content and made them and turned them into a global success for that very reason. So I'm quite interested into the way that audiences have been reacting to My Brilliant Friend since the show's been released on HBO back in November.
The show was released on HBO in November and also on RAI, which was the other commissioning broadcaster. And there were a lot of day-and-date releases all around the world. We have had really positive feedback, almost only positive feedback, so we're very happy about the result. And I must say that the part that this is the first foreign language series that HBO has produced. And they are really happy about the results, so it's a successful story, yes.
But would you say, again, that the language driver has been one of the priority reason why audiences have been drawn so much to the show?
Well, I think that was, we have gotten a lot of attention because of the foreign language, but actually My Brilliant Friend is based on a novel that has been such a success. It was kind of weird even for us to see the Ferrante fever take off, and we were sitting on the rights of the books. And but it's been one of the ingredients to make the package really work is also to keep it authentic and keep the real true story about Lila and Leno.
But do you think that this new huge trend is one of the many reasons why so many now producers or content creators are actually turning to that type of shows and fictions? The reason why they're picking up so great successes to turn them into very global successes in terms of shows. Is it a new trend? Is it a new thing in the industry?
Yes, I think what we hear when we talk with the big players is that they say, think locally. So try to do something, we work in Italy, to do Italian stories in Italian language and work on that because it's a big request for local, genuine content. And as long as it's a good story, you can work with that even in a different language, yes.
So now, based on your incredible experience, let's tackle some do and don'ts when it comes to actually producing such incredible contents in local languages. From your perspective, what is the most challenging in the production process?
Well, what wasn't challenging with My Brilliant Friend? We had 8 months of casting the roles of Lila and Leno. And I think the director, together with the casting team, saw around 9,000 kids to cast the roles, not only of Lina and Lelo, obviously, but also the other friends from the Rione. And it took so long time because to find, they're not actresses, these are girls coming from the neighborhood in Naples that actually speak Neapolitan, and they have to resemble to the novel, otherwise the audience will get really disappointed. And then, since it is a story that spans from the 50s until today, we need to use at least 4 different actresses for each role to find actresses that actually resembles both physically but also emotionally. It was a real challenge, but I think our director Saverio Costanzo made a perfect, brilliant, really brilliant job with the casting.
And so now, of course, I mean, picking up like the right actresses or the right part for the right cast is, of course, a challenge. Now, what does it change in terms of distributing the show? Is it also another challenge for you? Again, back to the language question.
Okay. No, another challenge was actually the post-production and the very tight schedule we had. And that, where it comes to dubbing too, since there was a big request from not only the commissioning broadcasters, but also the other distributors, the sub-distributors, to do a day-and-date premiere. There was a big rush for the last 2-3 months before the release to get everything in place material-wise, and with the dubbing you always have to anticipate deliveries to be able to dub because it's very time-consuming work. But in the end, I think our post-production department worked 24/7 for 3 months, but they are happy now, and now we started with the second season and it will be exactly the same.
So you're applying the very same recipe to the second season as you actually did in the first, or were you, based on the experience of the first season, again, in the language domain, were you able to weigh, pros and cons to actually run the timing and the process of the production and post-production for the second season?
Yes, we will do our best, and obviously doing a second season, you learn from your mistakes, but not all of them. So I'm sure it will be smoother. We will be better to organize, especially post-production, and hopefully it will be not 24/7 for so long time in the end.
So again, the Member of Parliament, Kammerevert, was just reminding us about how crucial language is when it comes to national identity and cultural identity, and how crucial it is to us as Europeans. Would you say that it's a major driver here that we should definitely use to actually have those European works more being able to travel ultimately?
Sorry?
I mean, the language is definitely part of the driver, you know, when it comes to European has and to try to pick up better content. So would you say that this new trend is definitely something we should follow and we should look closer at for the next, in the future of the industry?
No, absolutely. I think everything is connected with good stories, being genuine stories, going back locally to see what we have to tell the rest of the world, traveling with our products. And that is absolutely involving the language. You can't really produce a genuine production without using your own language if the story is located there. So absolutely, and it's a very good moment right now for us European producers, because the request is high and we are there to fulfill the requests.
So we had a little discussion prior to the actual discussion we do have on stage right now, just reminding us about how cultural it is too when it comes to dubbed content and subtitle content. Like, for instance, I'm French, of course, and there was this huge trend about dubbing when I was a kid back in the days in France. But you're Swedish, and you were like, I grew up without any dubbed content, so it was really weird to me to actually know that dubbed content do exist in other countries when it comes to Europe. So where are we actually right now with this trend? Are users still craving for dubbing type of content, or are they more trying to now tend to have subtitled content?
Yes, I grew up in Sweden where we don't dub anything, and I've lived 20 years in Italy where they dub everything. And but I think the younger generation that use a lot tablet and they use the streaming services, etc., etc. You have a choice. You can choose to see the films, the series in the original language, or subtitled or dubbed. And I think many of the younger users, the consumers, they choose to see the original language, or at least I hope that it's so. But right now, today, at least in Italy, and I think also in France and Germany and Spain, it would be pretty impossible to do a release totally without a dubbed version.
Okay, so we still need to actually put our egg in the basket of the dubbed version if we want to succeed abroad, right?
Right now, today, yes.
And it's not only for the animation or the video game part of the industry, it's also relies on the film industry per se.
Well, animation and video games are made for children, so I guess it's necessary to dub there. But for other content, hopefully we're slowly moving out of the dubbed versions.
If you do have a question or reaction for Karine, please raise your hand, and a mic actually will magically appear in front of you. Do we have any question? Do we have any reaction to share with this incredible producer of two global successes, such as A Young Pup and My Brilliant Friends? Or friend, by the way, not friends. We don't have any questions? Seriously? Okay, so to put it in a nutshell, Karine, if you had to pick up one ingredient that actually made or turned your shows into global successes, would you definitely say it's all about the languages?
No, it's about the genuine production that we made, because actually we didn't speak about the Young Pope, but that was a production made in English with some parts in Italian, but that was because it's a series set in the Vatican City where actually there's a multilinguistic culture, people coming from all over the world there. So it's English with some Italian, and we actually partially subtitled that too. But obviously the language is one part of doing authentic stories. So obviously it's extremely important.
So keep on being genuine to the story, try to be really authentic when it comes to languages, and that reason why actually you'll have wider audiences following. Okay, thank you so much. Thanks for sharing your experience.
Thank you very much.
And now we'll end it over our very first discussion panel. We're going to try to understand in a multilingual digital market how we can make better circulating audiovisual content in this very context. We're going to take a look at the demand and the supply side of the market. We're about to welcome on stage actually a TV company, an animation company, and a sales agent one, and they will share their challenges they've been facing up on daily basis, and of course the solutions they come up with. Please give a warm welcome to Patrick Leucht for Deutsche Welle, Christine Knudsen for Richard the Stork, and Jenny Wallendy for The Match Factory. Please, ladies and gentlemen, grab a seat.
Do you want us in any specific order?
No, as you wish. You're on this very stage as on your very home, so please make yourself comfortable so we can start the discussion. And actually, I'd like first us to assess the challenges we have to face today when it comes to dubbing and subtitling, of course. We're going to start, if you may, with the TV side of it and the sales side of it. So Patrick and Jenny, be ready. First, what is the very first challenge you have to come up with today when it comes to languages? What is the very first question that pops in your head, Patrick, when you have to license or when we have to create one content for television?
30.
As many languages as you have to turn them into?
Exactly. Ideally, we turn it in every single language that we run. And I think that's a little bit special because when you say representative of a TV, I have to say that it's a public. First of all, we are public and we're not only TV, but mainly online, but still we do TV. And we are an international broadcaster. So we are one of the biggest international broadcasters running globally 30 languages. 10 out of them are European languages. So you see the scope. And this is a tremendous variety of markets. It's a tremendous variety of cultures, of understanding, of perception, tradition. You can count on everything. And we have to customize everything very deeply to every single market because we are not broadcasting on satellite everything for everybody. We do that in English and in German, while the German channel is positioned as a kind of cultural channel, and the English channel is positioned as a news channel with a lot of analytics and explanation. It's not like CNN, it goes a little bit deeper. We have an expert role, we try to take an expert role. And even in English, we dispatch for African markets, American markets, and Asian markets. So the content is not the same, moderators are not the same for the different shows, which means that we customize heavily. And the challenge is even worse when you turn to all these smaller languages, from Romanian to Hindi, from Swahili to Polish. And to be honest, our standard at the moment is adaptation, full adaptation, which means no dubbing, no subtitling. It means that, for instance, a magazine, a simple magazine, like Focus on Europe, which is a 26-minute thing with 5 different topics in, moderated by a moderator or set of moderators. We do that in up to 12 languages. It means that every single language edition is picked from its text. It's rewritten and adapted by a member of the respective language service. It means that every single article or text that has been the basis of the spoken words for the report is taken again, translated, but put also in context. So the guys checks what is presented to this audience in the original version, to that match the level of pre-knowledge of the language service that I am up to produce, and put it in a context. So the moderation is again reworked to make it fit for the cultural or political context of the respective language, and then we reproduce it with native speakers, and then it is put on screen with a native speaker moderator. You wonder why our budget never is sufficient for all this work. But on the other hand, if you want acceptance in these markets, we found out that first on our own platforms, it performs quite well. And you can see that for Polish version, for Russian version, for instance, quite heavily, for others to a certain extent. But our sales system is our own platforms. So TV, HD, put it online on Facebook, YouTube, etc. But we have more than 5,000 rebroadcasting partners. A rebroadcasting partner globally. We have about 500 in the EU countries. Rebroadcasting partner can be big public national, can be private, can be a website, can be a web TV, can be everything, but the whole range. But we always have to think in best quality, so it means fully fledged TV, because it can be picked by a Croatian national broadcaster, it can be picked by, it can be appear as a video on the website of Gazeta Wyborcza, for instance, which is an important partner for us in Poland. So that is more or less the challenge that we have, and it means that the standard is more adaptation, but it's true that we have to find other solutions as well, and that we are stepping more and more into other technologies, including subtitling.
And we'll actually tackle one of the solutions you came up with in a few seconds. But first, I'd like to know what is more crucial to you right now when you're actually, of course, we're talking sales too, but when you're trying to license or sell actually a content abroad, what is more important, dubbing or subtitling? Or both are equal in terms of how well the show is going, or the content you're trying to sell is going to perform? Please, yep, sure. I am.
Thank you. So I'm an animation feature film producer from Norway and Germany. And in animation, which is for all audiences, not just children, we work a lot with the dubbing. And it's a great opportunity. And we made a film called Richard the Stork, which was dubbed into 28 languages and sold to 155 countries and had a theatrical release in 62. So it really... that was because it's a family film, so it's clearly that subtitling wouldn't be an option. But it's amazing to see how it opened up a large the world market basically, and also it was a lot of opportunities, as you say, with the adaptation. For us, being a European production, we had more freedom, and we could give the distributors in the different countries some freedom to also adapt. Like put in little jokes that would be maybe more understood in that culture, that were not always in the script, because we also had birds, so they wouldn't be completely lip sync. So there's also really an opportunity to adapt a little bit to the local market through the dubbing.
And again, I do understand it's definitely a question of being really genuine with the type of content you're actually running when it comes to animation, or when it comes to pure information. Again, when you have to try to sell, are dubbing and subtitling like great drivers to actually sell those content abroad, and what part of dubbing your client will go for, what part of subtitling would they go for? Jenny?
I think for us, since we're selling films that are mainly based in the art house part of the film business, it depends on the territory we're selling to, whether they will decide to dub or subtitle the film. What we've been seeing over the course of the past years is that even those territories which initially would only go for dubbing the films have started to also use subtitled versions parallelly. There's actually there's a stronger focus on subtitling for art house films because it's also a matter of authenticity, which is, I think, something that our audiences value. Yeah.
So, again, I do understand you do operate like 30, 28, or 10 or 15 languages as many different markets, not depending on the pure content you're actually trying to sell here. But Patrick, how would you then turn the language question into a real driver when it comes to fighting for European content?
Sorry?
How would you turn the language factor into a real driver to defend, again, the European wax globally?
Yeah, I mean, the language issue is very critical on a variety of levels for Europe. I just came out of a meeting this morning where a new book has been presented by a communication expert that worked for an office in Germany and for the Greens in the European Parliament. And he now pushes for a European digital platform. And the main idea is to take back the public sphere out of a completely privatized digital internet sphere. Very interesting thing. And the language issue obviously stays again as the main challenge when you want to create that feeling of values and diversity and culture in Europe. So you have to work these different languages and you have to adapt for the different perception habits and the realities. But at the same time, you have to drive it into something common. If not, it stays like, okay, this is okay, you are okay, I am okay. So that's a little bit what happens at the moment. And that is not creating a kind of sentiment of belonging to the same continent, to the same sphere. So everybody is struggling with the fact that you have to serve the people in its language, and at the same time you have to keep away from simply focusing on national markets or on single regions. And that indeed is challenging. I definitely think that a strategy of making most of the content that is produced across Europe available for as many as people is the right thing to do. That is one thing. Everything else is beyond to create more civil society via debating tools, etc., etc. I think that's something different. That is not part of the film market or the creative industry market here. But one thing is also for sure for the future, I think, everything merges on mobile devices. And that will heavily change all our habits to watch TV or see contents. That's why also I'm not sure if the Commission should push too much. I mean, we also run Horizon 2020 projects in subtitling, right? And I can show you the tool that we do, how it is subtitling, how it is putting speech to subtitling in all the languages that you can imagine.
And we can actually see it right now on the screen.
It's Newsbridge. It's called Newsbridge. It is automated speech recognition with a machine translation, and then it can be edited, but it goes directly to subtitles. And when you see the next slide and start the screen cast, click again, please. So then what it does is when you simply choose a video and you put the video in the system, then you choose a language in which you want to translate. And the screencast now is real time, so it's no fake, right? It's a screencast, but that is how you work on it. Then easily you can start the video, and while it is loading, it is starting to translate. It drives the database. For some contents, for some languages, it is Google Translate, obviously, but we use also database from other research institutions, and we use also the database of the European Commission, the translation service. And here you see what happens when the translation is done. If we have sound, you could hear what people say in the video. You can follow what it does, and you can correct it. So you can edit it if you want, right? For the moment, we are testing this in a beta version in 10 different language departments in our company, and most of them are quite amazed. The bad news about it is this research project here is funded by Google News. But there is a similar project that's called Zuma, which builds on same technology. The difference is that Zuma is meant for newsmen. You have a screen, and you can put every single social media or website of a newspaper in, and it translates at the same time then you watch it. But that is not meant for the audience. It is meant to make newsman's job easier so that he can follow all different sources in a language that he can understand. So it's to identify what, for instance, the Indonesian TV just says at this very moment. Yeah? So it's more for internal use, but it builds on the same technology. There's a lot of technical hints here, and Martin and others that comes up for the tech part later can tell about the difficulty to get time codes right, particularly when longer pieces are translated within, and all that nitty-gritties that definitely decide on the quality. A major point here is the smaller the language, the poorer the performance is. In 4 to 5 language, we have more or less what we call there's a term for that human rate. So it's 95% correct. That is more or less what you have with a good translator. So it works quite well in big languages, but with all the smaller languages, the point is that you have not enough material and not enough experience for the tool to better the algorithms. And the point here is that we need stuff to translate with the tool to make the tool learn. And this is truly a break in the development of the quality of this tool. And that shows a little bit the challenge of Europe, because we have all these 24, 25, 26 languages, and globally there are even more. And the domination is about the mass of data that you put in. So in English or in German or in French or in Spanish, results are very good, but you have to learn for all the other languages. And that is something that we have to think of. It's really a political issue, and it's obviously a matter of use. But if we are the one and only using it for smaller languages in Europe, so then it takes years to build up the algorithm quality in a way that is sufficient, right? So that is a way that you can work, but the diversity will remain. But it's a tool that you can drive by yourself and make available all the content you ever want for yourself available, which might play on the accessibility and also on costs.
We'll definitely get back to the challenges of developing a machine learning system good enough to actually beat the human translation, if you will, our tech guys in the next panel. But even though it's supported by the Google Fund for the press, how expensive is it to develop such a platform?
I don't know exactly. It's done in a consortium of 4 companies. It's not really the big ones at the moment, and several companies are working on similar technologies. Don't ask me what is really the differences, but what I can say is it seems that some initiatives are, merging, knowledge. There's a lot of different attempts to have the same result, and obviously some of them come to very good results at the end of the day. What we can say from the newsrooms, the test phase, for instance, in the newsroom, when it comes to cost for translation or for subtitling, the newsrooms feedbacked that it's a ratio from 1 to 4, that the time they need to to make the subtitles ready, working with the tool and only correcting the things and make it nice in case the time code has not matched or the length of the characters on the screen has not matched or all that kind of stuff. Take them only one part of 4 than the work on the subtitles before. And that is a big matter of efficiency. Obviously, you need to have access to the databases, and obviously you have to work on the tool. But I don't think what we are talking about massive amounts of money to make such kind of tool available, because it is built also on public accessible databases, like the e-translation database of the translation service of the European Commission.
So definitely one of the takeaway we can have from this very solution example with you, Patrick, is the fact that we have to join forces when it comes to gathering a massive amount of data that we can actually better train our algorithms so that it can come up with better translations, and at the same time sharing costs. Are you actually using one of those tools when it comes to animation, or is it still like human-based type of translated content?
We work with humans only.
Wow. Oh, wow. There's still room for humans. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's very, very old school, isn't it? No, yeah. It's, I think there's a lot of different price categories of dubbing. And you can, depending on which media it's going to go out to, and of course how much money you have to invest in it. But it's really, we saw that when we released our film, that it was a big range possible. It can go from anything between 10,000 euros to maybe even 100,000 euros, depending on if you have very known cast and if they're part of the promotion as well. But I think that is one of the, in animation, the actors are breathing life into the characters. So, and it gives the audience the opportunity to identify closely with it in their own language. So that's also why it travels so well, because it connects directly through human. Yeah.
And it's definitely a different type of driver, again, to have this type of content traveling across different countries. Now, Jenny, when it comes to the type of content you're also selling and licensing, would you rather go for an automatization type of solution, the platform Patrick just showed, or rely on humans as Karin?
I think so far we've been just as old school as you, mostly when it comes to the subtitles, and it's a really heavily curated effort that the filmmakers are involved in to create the first English language subtitles of their films usually, or even other versions if they know a particular language well. So there's plenty of people really making an effort to look into the quality of these subtitles. I think when it comes to how it could develop in the future, what we've actually been speaking about at the lunch we had before this panel was that there could be systems that would actually do the less quality consuming work of subtitling, software which does the basic translation, and then you have editor or editing translators who actually work over it, which would then ultimately give us the chance to actually have less costly translation, which would then also give us the chance of possibly adding a few more territories to the sales that we would usually be able to do with a film.
But what would be your ideal or dream type of market that you could reach to thanks to dubbing or subtitling? Is there any specific region in the world that you would definitely couldn't be targeting or couldn't be reaching without subtitling and dubbing?
It's a bit a tough question that you're asking, because the way we're licensing right now is that we get the worldwide rights from the producers except for their territories, and then we license to distributors, which are companies who ultimately take care of a certain national market. So right now, the way we're looking at it is that in principle, any country that we license to will localize our product. But then again, I think where the chances are when it comes to the idea that I was just talking about, and reduce costs on subtitling, is really to actually then, after we've done our traditional work on the films, are the territories that we always receive like questions from consumers like, why is the film not available? And then the answer would be because no local distributor was actually had the feeling the film had such a potential that he could master the costs of distributing it fully. And for these territories, we would, I mean, of course, with nowadays platforms, VOD platforms, in whichever way they exist, like transactional, subscription, whatever, we would be able to probably position the content on such platforms.
Okay, we'll come back to the challenges of information and news network in a few seconds, but let me turn the question of reaching territory that you couldn't actually reach without subtitling and dubbing to the animation part of it. What territories do you still need to conquer, if I may, or to reach to with subtitling and dubbing?
Which markets we didn't reach?
Yeah, and which markets would you dream to actually be tackling and be reaching with subtitling and dubbing?
We did reach all territories with
wow.
dubbing.
Oh, wow. Okay, I'm sorry.
But on this specific film, but it's not comparable with we would have dubbed it, but this was actually sold to the whole world.
So. Wow, so checked. Okay. Wonderful. But
no, but I think the magic is really in that fact that, if I may just say how we did, how we worked, because it might be, I think you had it in your questions, like we produced ourselves 7 languages, because our film was a German, Belgium, Luxembourg, Norway co-production. Mm-hmm. And within Norway, we already have Nordic countries, which are 5 countries. The Benelux, we would have 2 languages, and in Germany. So just to do our normal delivery to our financiers, we already had 7 language versions. So we already had a lot of experience adapting that. We worked originally, so the working language making the film was English. Mm-hmm. And that is because that is the market language, so we would communicate with the buyers. Mm-hmm. But also because the production was very international. We had artists from all over Europe. That was the way we could commonly communicate about it. And through that experience, we got to know our own project even better and making those adaptations within the different languages. Mm-hmm. And then when the distributors had bought the film, then they would do their own dubbing in the way they saw it suitable. Mm-hmm. But we would have made very detailed guidelines based on our artistically intention of the film, but also of how we wanted to communicate that to other countries.
So that you can keep it genuine, of course, even in the translation part of it, and really, really genuine at the core of the content you were producing, right?
Sorry, say again.
The guidelines that you actually wrote to every single content producer, or the way that it's being translated into the 28 or minus the 7 basic languages, to the 21 languages you had to dubbed or subtitled them into.
But it was interesting because a lot of the distributors we worked with, you often work with US studio productions, and then it's very, very strict and very controlled how the dubbing is made and the translation is made. And our film, since we were controlling it, we could give a bit more freedom. And I think that was also a little key to success, so that we know that people could actually make a little more what you do when you translate in general, when you do it with your heart, you can make a local joke, or you can find the equivalent word or the expression that actually translates whatever you were saying, but not doing it from not that we would know better in that language, but really trusting the distributors to do their own slight interpretation. So a little bit more freedom we could give. I think that was good as well.
And actually, following this very example, is there more challenging type of territories when it comes to pure translation that you have to sell your content to? Like you named the US, for instance, like with really, legal rights type of constraints. Would you say there's very specific territories where this question of language is really difficult to tackle? In terms of rights, in terms of sales, in terms of being genuine and authentic to the content you're producing?
I mean, I think the term foreign language already says it a little bit, because it defines any language other than English, at least in the way we often use it. That being said, there's two rather large territories, the UK and the US, which don't dub films. The other larger territories, at least in our perspective, France, Germany, Spain, Italy, they do dub the films as a tradition, no matter how you want to judge this or how you want to move forward with it, but this is the traditional setup. And apparently in the English language territories who do not dub, who are still large territories, sometimes foreign language content has more trouble actually finding wider audiences, because the audiences are in fact, they are used to seeing content in their own language. So I mean, of course, we're distributing or we're selling our films certainly to these territories, but it's quite possible that admissions are lower for foreign language titles because they are not dubbed into the English language, but just subtitled.
So it's definitely a question also of cultural inheritance, if I may, when it comes to pure language type of question. Patrick, if we tackle back the question of pure information or news network or this type of content, there is also this new big trend running on platforms and social media where I'm going to have access to a very short type of content and everything's going to be subtitled just because I'm not putting the sound on every single time I'm actually watching a short movie or a short content when I just want to get access to the information. So is it a new driver or a new opportunity for the subtitling industry to have this revival type of trend?
Yes, definitely. I mean, on a mobile screen, everything comes together, and you have to look at what's happening there when you want to know what is the trend set for the next years. And one thing is that subtitling comes back heavily, simply because everybody in a metro on the street is watching whatever, but sound turned off. And subtitling, I think it's really, I really don't like to see half picture and then big subtitles on that screen, but obviously for others that's quite okay. And it is even okay in longer formats, it is even okay in fiction content, obviously. Don't stick to the news, which is kind of Bauchbinder, okay? So that comes back, and I think it will speed up because people learn that this is the platform to be, that is the use to be, that is the young generation. They don't care too much about this quality, obviously. Quality for them is different. So that's why that will heavily speed up.
But have you been able to figure out if you are gaining new audiences or having access to wider, younger, more diverse audiences through that type of subtitle content?
I'm not sure that subtitling is so important for us. On video, it will be important. We have rebroadcaster, for instance, that do online only, that are usually subtitling online, but not on their TV. So when you look at the list of countries that we serve, particularly in Eastern Europe, you see that some of them are very familiar on subtitling when it comes to online, but not when it comes to TV. So what I see is also a split of market. When you look at the European map now, you see clearly three types of countries where dubbing, subtitling, or original sound is really common sense and standard, with some exceptions.
And those countries are?
Yeah, you look at, there is a web published by the European Commission. You see whole Northern Europe, for instance, Scandinavia, Great Britain, etc. It's all original with subtitles. That's why all these Norways and Swedes speak so well English. That is what we think. Then you have the countries in which dubbing is the absolute standard, and I think it's not by coincidence that it is the big ones, because the big public systems, the rich public systems have fueled that habit very early. They had the means to do that. They had the market to do that. Like the US have 400 million first for English, so then you can spread that out easily to the world. You have done it for 400,000, it is monetized, it is commercialized, etc. So from very early in TV, before the private market entered the market, or the privates entered the market, the standards were set to audience. And I think it's simply because they had the means for it, right? And then you have a range of countries where it depends heavily on the production, where it depends heavily on what specific product it is, etc. Then you have this specific market of art house, etc., where you then teach from original sound, and there are many reasons. But it will merge on the mobile platforms for some, and we have the same study in 10 years. I think that we have to look at what is happening in TV and what is happening on online and what's happening on the platforms, on the Netflix or whatever. And I think that we will have a broader range of possibilities that people are familiar with. That is what I think.
Don't forget
let me add one point, because
Please.
I was a little bit struck, you clapping, because then he said we count on the human factor. We also do. We never fired somebody because we had a translation machine, right? But I give you an example. We have a budget of more or less 300 million a year, which is huge. We serve the whole world. We touch 167 million users a week. 167 million users a week, which is great globally. We are third globally. But it is even not half of European population, with a huge amount of money. We run 30 languages, but we have newsrooms that are updating a website once a day only. We have set up a Turkish YouTube channel with the help of the government. We got 5 million for 1 year to set up a Turkish YouTube channel. I think you all understand why Germany and European countries that are contributing to it think that an alternative news voice in Turkey would make sense at this very moment. We got 5 million, which is really exceptional to get for a public media at this very moment, 5 million for a project. This 5 million is enough to set up a nice YouTube platform and to fill it more or less ready with quality journalism content for a year. But then the money is over. So don't ask me to go back to the human factor, to do all that translation and adaptation work to make these contents available for as many as people in the language, to make sure that communication passes. Every single stuff that is not busy by checking translation or subtitles is doing real journalism. He's on research, he's on mission, he's on reporting, he's on shooting. We don't want people busy doing this kind of, routine thing. I agree that you cannot do that with a film. Many things needs to be done by humans. That is very clear. But in revanche, quality journalism counts, and the investments in quality journalism are not that prior at the moment, nor for the privates, nor for the publics. So think about that when it comes to the human factor. We want people out reporting in Turkey and not busy turning English stuff into Turkish. Thanks.
So, wow, yeah, I'm definitely going to give the questions to the floor again. Mike is just coming to you. I guess if you can reach there first end, but I'll just, okay, there you go.
Hello, my name is Andrea Kirchhardt. I'm a film translator, and I came to this event because it's called the European Film Forum. It is, as far as I know, not called the European Newsreel Forum or whatever. And I'm a bit surprised that the question of translation, whether subbing or dubbing, is treated as a kind of problem. Why isn't there a single representative of our branch with you on the panel speaking about what we are able to do and what we continue doing all the time? And as much as as I said, I mean, Deutsche Welle is very interesting, but it's European Film Forum. And as you just said, and I want to repeat it, in film, this is completely different. Why are we talking so long about maybe interesting issues, but it's only about newsreels? We thought we were talking about film. And just as a minor incident, there is on the Berlin Film Festival an event that will talk about film translation, on the history of film translation. It is on Wednesday, 13th, 6 o'clock, Filmhaus. Please come, and perhaps it's be more to the topic.
Thanks for the update, and don't shoot the messenger. I'm just, moderating the event here. But the thing that we want to make this discussion, if I'm translating well the spirit of the European Film Forum, we want to make it as diverse as possible. I mean, see, we're having discussion with people who are actually beneficiaries from the media program and the Creative Europe initiatives. So what we really want to do as Europeans, content producers, broadcasters, filmmakers, is just to try to get a glimpse at what are the do and don'ts and what people have came up in terms of solution with. So that the reason why we're trying to mix and match various different parts of the industry so that we can have better options and listen to, different various solutions.
I would also like to answer or just give a thought back to you, because ultimately, at least what the Match Factory is doing would be, we're dealing with films originally, and we find ourselves in a heavily changing market right now, for the last years, most likely, very likely for the coming years. And I do think that it's quite good to actually have an exchange with all different, with the respect of each of us, like us in the sense of you and everybody involved in making a film travel, to still exchange ideas with other parts of the sector that may have resources to actually access technological solutions that we may not have been able to access yet. Maybe ultimately they won't be the right solution for us, but it's an exchange of ideas that I think is very valuable for the times that we find ourselves in.
I understand. I understand your concern, but I think for the whole afternoon, I'm the one and only. All the others are filming. There are two more panels to come, where film is more prominent. On a broader scope, publics are still big drivers even in the film market, because they are commissioning also fiction. We are not, right? But when you look at publics, they do. They are an important driver. And we are not only in news. What documentaries, for instance, and features are very important for us. And when you look at translation and all these problems that comes with it, so then this turns hell, because simple news is easy to translate, to understand, but documentaries is different. For instance, more sophisticated productions, and so far we're really not only in news, and on the broader scope, publics are part of this market.
Okay, let's take another question, please. And just to put an end to this question, we never said language was a constraint. We're just saying it's part of the solution to have better European wax traveling, ma'am. So let's take another question. And I don't know where the mic is. Okay, there you go.
Hello, my name is Gabi Gehlen. I'm president of the AVU. That's the German Audiovisual Translators Association. And I would just like to say something on this point, on the news translation. Just now you said that translating news is an easy thing. I would disagree. I'm also a trained interpreter. Translating news is a very, very complicated thing, and I think especially in the world we live right now, it would be fatal to have automatic news translations going all over the world. It is very, especially there, I would say it's very important to be precise, and that you cannot count out the humans, you know. And one thing which this is boiling down to, for me, the conclusion is that all those people who spoke, who have given good examples of how it works internationally, are those who have actually included the translation process in their post-production. And that is something we've been fighting for a long time, because the problem is that although everybody now wants to market their products internationally, translation is the last thing that seems to come to their mind. Oh, somebody has to translate this, you know, which is really not understandable, because film directors have spent so much time on their scripts. Why should then now somebody just, you know, do it in like a week's time or in 3 days' time? That's a big problem, and I think we've heard examples where it worked, and that's something we should really look for in the whole film industry and film funding, that this can be used much more widely.
Okay. Does someone wants to react to this question? Because actually, it's definitely language is definitely something that we're gonna put first on the to-do list when we're producing or creating content, like with the example of the Young Pope and the example of Marielle and Friend. Of course, language was definitely, again, a factor and a driver to have these brilliant and incredible stories told.
Thank you for that. I just wanted to say that these days, when we also finance our film internationally and we work in co-productions, usually also during the development have a translation. Like when we work, we usually have a German, an English, a French screenplay, just to be able to finance the film with our finances in Europe. So we start, and we have to do that. And it's also very enriching, because as soon as you translate into another language and you get reactions to what is maybe working, what's not so good, and then you can adapt. And I think that's also a way to make scripts better, that they actually travel better as well.
Let's take another question. It's going to be the third question, then we'll switch to the following panel.
Thank you. My name is Vincent Lucas from Under the Milky Way. We also are very interested in doing subtitling, because we see many times that subtitling is the last hurdle to take to go in an additional territory for the platforms we work with, like iTunes and Google, and also the European ones. And we came up, we are also one of the beneficiaries of Creative Europe from the subtitle program, and we created actually exactly something was this in between. The software you just saw is functioning very nice, but what you saw, the picture was just some simple YouTube or whatever video machine, but we created actually a platform where already the subtitle software is online, and there you have already also the answers to the discussion which is going on here. You can combine the two different things. You can combine the automatic machine translation. We did quite some research on that. We talk in Valencia, where there is a great translation department at the university. They actually are from the same school as the Google Translator. They're all got their education in Germany. And they also do great work, and they also look for a lot of data. But of course, Google Translate is so big because they have the best searching machine. But it's free use, so indeed you can implement that. But we work, so from the one hand, we build this platform where you have this video player and the subtitle software. On the other hand, we are creating administration around it that the rights holder and the translator can find each other. So machine translation can maybe help a bit and speed up, but the work still has to be done. And what we offer to our translators, and I work together with Matthew Way, who is one of the Match Factory's translators as well. And it's obvious that the work has to be done by humans, by professional translators, because you need literary translations or literacy translations, not just a machine. So that's where the work has to be done. But it can be streamlined, it can be organized much better, it has to be better involvement from the producer in the beginning, because he has to steer. As soon as a festival takes the film, there should already be an English template from which the Russian translator for the Russian festival will make the Russian translation, because then you had a good subtitle version that has to be approved before it's given free, and the producer or the sales has then the subtitle version that can be used for later release on VOD. So it's thought from out the rights holder to keep control over the subtitle process during the whole way, but also it makes sense that you can come then easier to the next territories. So we're working on this, and I just wanted to say it's great that news is already a step further and doing it fast. We can learn from that. And on the other hand, we have to take care of the traditional way of translating, because without that, we can't forget it.
Thank you very much for this super interesting example, though. So sharing this example from the Milky Way is a perfect, actually, way to put it to the next panel we're going to have. So first, please give some applause to our three great panelists here, Jenny, Kristen, and Patrick. Thank you very much for sharing your experiences with us. And actually, yeah, the next panel is definitely focused on the technological side of it and how technology is helping to make European wax more accessible. You're released from duty on stage, by the way. Thank you so much. So actually, we're going to discuss concretely now how technology helps us to make wax circulate better. We're going to get a glimpse at the innovation domain with Annemie de Gries from Lumière, Martin Vervest, the CEO and founder of Limecraft, Federico Keen, the lead developer and head of subtitling of Mubi, and Mariam Eggman, the international project coordinator for ZDF Digital. Thank you so much for joining us right now. And we're actually lucky enough to have three of our panelists right now who are part of the EU Preparatory Action, which supports them to experiment with technology to create subtitle content. That is Martine, of course, Federico, and Miriam. And Annemie, actually, you have experience with Lumière, not only in distribution of films, of course, but also in production. So you're going to help us bridge the gap between what comes from the market and products, what requires subtitling, dubbing, and everything. So if you may, I want to start with you, though, to get a better understanding on how the market trends are going right now in terms of dubbing, subtitling. What is the most important and crucial? What's the first question that pops in your mind when you want to turn, any type of content into a global success?
Well, I think that a lot has been said already. And if you say that this panel is about new technology, then I think I'm the old-fashioned one here, because so far we haven't used any new technologies to subtitle nor to dub, as well in production, either in distribution. But if we think about our distribution as well as the production, then we think the more local, the more global. So, and that's what has been said since the beginning. The genuinity from the productions is very important. And then I can maybe use an example that we had. Since we are based in the Benelux, we're based in the Flemish territory, the Dutch-speaking territory, which is written the same language as the Netherlands. Although we have the same written language, you could say that it's a difference, like you have the difference in the French-speaking Quebec and France, a difference. So if we do subtitles, then we do need to be very careful, because we won't do subtitles for the Flemish-speaking part of Belgium, nor for Holland, but we try to have something in between. And we had one issue as distributor. For organization reasons, we had made the subtitles in Belgium, Flanders, and we had a huge quarrel on internet going on. What kind of subtitles are these? Was that Google Translate or what? We don't understand a thing here, and blah, blah, blah. It was like, oh my God, this is just Dutch, And so, I mean, even when you speak the same language, there is a cultural difference between people. And we need to take that into account if we're really thinking about trying to have our things translated by Google.
So which brings me to takeaways here. Like, first, of course, language is definitely a question you ask yourself by design, because you have at least to produce one content in both languages, in Flemish and in French-speaking languages. And then I do understand that Google Translation is an insult right now.
Well, it helps if you, like for news, if you want to understand what is happening, then I think Google Translate is really helpful. But then if you really, I think, news, you can't compare it with what we try to do with film, that you need another kind of translation, I guess.
So actually, what type of solution have you been adopted so far when it comes to, again, thinking about the way you're going to produce better translation, better subtitles, better dubbing for your content?
Well, there are two things. We are in today, and of course we want to to look at the future, look at what is our future audience and how do they behave. So in the first place, we think about, okay, what is our audience and what do they want? What is my product? What will they look after? How do we have translated it or not? So I think that today we are still to improve that. We try to have the common subtitles. It's less important for the French than for the Dutch subtitles. But then we see, especially for the younger audience, that they are used more and more in our countries to English because they're watching all the time YouTube, because they're all the time on Facebook on what has been said without sound, just having subtitles, English all the time. So we are wondering whether in the future, not tomorrow, but in the future, what about the English subtitles all over Europe? Because I think it's a European thing, that content might travel much more quicker than we think, because our youngsters today, who are 16, 17, will be in 10 years' time, 27, and they will, I guess, used to the English, the European English that we all speak.
And of course, following closely what's going on in terms of trends of viewing with younger audiences is crucial, because if we don't have audiences in the near future, we won't have any story to tell to those audiences, right?
Yes, indeed, and it's that we need to. I think that we need to focus on. Well, with the distribution side, we have a platform as well that we want to. We don't want to be a new Netflix, because that's useless. But we really want to see what is the audience for tomorrow, and how will they watch movies. Is it, for example, good to have foreign content that we just put in English subtitles, or is it so? These are all questions that we ask ourselves to see how we can improve. At the same time, I need to be very careful, because I'm a producer as well. And if we speak about English subtitles, then I think about the territoriality, which is so important for us today as a producer, because otherwise we cannot finance our movies. And there comes the distributor as well, where it's in a way his power, the subtitles, because with the subtitles he can finance, he can get his finance back. So we are in Europe a bit in two ways. Like, we need to open up. I think that our audience is going much more open, thanks to the English, thanks to what is happening on the platform, thanks to the social media thing. And at the same time, we do not have a new financing pan-European plan ready to finance our productions in the future. I think, well, I hope someone maybe have one planned, and I would love to speak to him. But
well, we'll probably ask this question to the closing remark. Actually, panelist who's going to join us in a few now. But let me turn the mic actually to the guys who are actually part of the discussion when it comes to preparing actions for subtitling and dubbing with the European Commission, and we'll challenge actually their solution with yours. Martin, maybe first. At Limecraft, what solution are you trying to come up with?
The most recent extension of our workflow platform, which, by the way, handles dailies and rushes, parts of the post-production process which are automated. Then a couple of years ago, we did a custom project really for the Belgian Public Service broadcaster on subtitling for accessibility purposes, because there is now, we knew there is an European Accessibility Act that was coming. I think it's going to be voted in March, with obligations for broadcasters to have subtitles on 80 or 90% of their content. And ironically, the VRT did not bring the prototype funded by them in production, but BBC did. It's actually our biggest user of our subtitling software is the BBC. And then we saw this call for projects and funding for adding localized subtitles into the platform. And that's where we are now. So the software, in principle, is capable of taking a subtitle file in English, and in seconds, it gives it a first shot into any other language. I'm not saying it's 100% accurate. It will need QC. I'm not saying it's... I understand there's controversy on a human translator versus the machine, but please accept that artificial intelligence will take some of the steps, and you know, it's our mission to bring cutting-edge technology into the hands of creative professionals, not to get rid of creative professionals. So that's how we look at it.
And you probably agree that the final, the solution in the end is probably a mix and match of automatization, AI, and human abilities actually to cope with those challenges, which are still super crucial when it comes to the identity of a content and to the identity and diversity of European wax per se. Miriam, what are your challenges when it comes to ZDF digital?
We are basically facing the same challenges as every producer, I guess, that prices are lowering for subtitling. So we came across this call for funding, and we decided to start a project called Computer-Assisted Subtitling. So this also highlights the fact that we don't want to replace the subtitler, but we want to help him do his or her job more efficiently. So what we are planning to do, our project still runs until the end of June, so we're about to go into a beta testing phase. Our project basically consists in ingesting a film into a automatic speech recognition, which is already equipped with a default style guide, because I guess all of the subtitlers among you know about the Netflix style guides, for example, which are very strict, and our subtitlers spend half of their time counting frames. But this is, I don't know, a waste of time. So why not let the machine have the frames already counted? So we have this automatic speech recognition. We are struggling with it, I admit it. But then we already have those timed transcripts, which is then post-edited by the subtitler into subtitles, which is then ingested into machine translation into English. And then it is again post-edited by a professional subtitler. And then we use English as a relay language from which we create subtitles into all possible languages which are available in machine translation. Why are we passing via English? Because we imagine that, let's suppose we have a French film we want to translate into Finnish or subtitle in Finnish. There is probably no machine translation available from French to Finnish, so we pass via English by hoping that this will facilitate the task. This is a random example, yeah. I'm not, it's just fiction, but this is basically how our tool is supposed to work, and then what comes along with it is an online-based, browser-based subtitling tool. We are working with the University of Mainz, Germersheim, and they are doing usability studies with conventional subtitling tools that give us hints and information about how we should design our subtitling tool in order to make it ergonomic for the subtitler to work with.
In how many different languages are you beta testing the system?
So for the project, we decided to beta test with French, German, and Swedish, and English because it comes as relay language. But we hope that we will be able to include more languages during the, I don't know how to call it, alpha testing.
Sure. And just to make sure I totally understood the way the solution is working, is it like a speech-to-text type of technology you're using here?
Yeah, so the first step is the speech recognition, and we're using different speech recognitions with APIs, and I guess we all know the limits of speech recognition, so this is the most tricky part for the moment. So we also thought about the possibility of uploading a transcript that is already existing and not necessarily passed by the automatic speech recognition. But maybe it's going to get better one day.
We mentioned a lot of platforms in the last debate and this one too. So let's turn the mic to a platform here, and it's you, Federico, with Mubi. Well, actually, what type of solution are you using in Mubi so that I can totally choose the language I want to turn the documentary into?
So we are globally available, and we started a couple of years ago. We only had 4 languages: English, German, French, and Spanish. And we recently tried to scale up to 10 languages. Also, we were struggling with the subtitles even for those 4 languages. Most of the times, our distributors do not really provide us with suitable subtitles, and that makes the film just not be able to play in the countries that we want, so we have different programmings per country. About a year ago, we started with the funding of the European Union, trying to work with translators to generate these subtitles in a system we built in-house, and it's proven to be really useful for us, and it's shown really promising results on our end. First of all, one of the things I would like to mention is that our churn was our third reason of people leaving our platform was missing subtitles. And even though we grew in the last year, that number got reduced to 1/3 of its original value. So it's pretty promising and very important for us to continue scaling in the subtitling languages that we offer. On the other hand, the prices that we're paying for a human translator makes it unviable for us to do all of our films globally. Some of our films are quite small, are an art house, and they wouldn't get enough views for us to be able to support, to cost the subtitle.
Because to make it clear to the entire audience, who's then supporting the costs of translation, either when it comes to subtitling or dubbing, when you have to bridge the gap between the 6 languages you mentioned?
So we are Mubi, and basically that comes from the revenue that Mubi generates, and we're a small company in that sense, so we don't have the possibility to do it for all the languages. So that's why media in this case really helped us to cover that, and to also use it as a test to know how important is this, will we get the benefit, and the subtitles we're generating, they go back to the distributors right now, and the idea is to work closer with distributors to generate these subtitles beforehand. But after a year of our experiment, if you like, which is only basically human-based with a bit of technology assisting there, our translators are even asking us to be able to speed up the number of films they can process to provide base subtitles, which obviously we can't. The distributor doesn't provide that. So our aim is in the next year to work towards using 2 solutions that automatically generate a subtitle either by speech to text or by translation, to provide those 2 solutions to the to our human translators to finish off the translations. And we hope that using that we can lower the price and we can also do more films.
And based on your data and the viewer experience, which is the most interesting anecdote you have while having this one success out of a documentary that, you turn into a success just because you've been able to provide the content with several different languages? Do you have like this one, super interesting anecdote?
Yeah, so we had like a film that was not going to be released globally, it's called Wild Boys, sorry, it's from France from last year. And it got picked by our content team as a special discovery. We have like a curation where we pick a film a month and it makes a special discovery. It was only going to play in our main markets, which were UK and US, because we didn't have subtitles. And then with the European Union, we managed to generate the other 10 languages, and it went live in 251 countries that we have. Yeah, so it went globally, and it did really amazing. We got people excited in Latin America about the film that we didn't expect it to happen, and then in Asia as well. So it's two markets that for us are small. We don't have that many subscribers in those markets currently, and it still did really well for those markets. So it's really good success for us.
But following up on this question, do you think that this type of examples are still like, like this one example, this one miracle on the platform, or do you plan, or can you actually rely on having more of those, languages type of miracle happening in the near future, or is it still random?
No, I don't think it's random. I think there you have the language enabling that film to play in that country for us, and then you have behind it the curation of our team explaining why that film was picked and what's interesting about that film that is not a synopsis. So it's a combination of the two. I really do not think it's random, and we intend to do it with as many films as we can. That's why we're exploring ways to, without the funding it will be very difficult for us to do it with the amount of films that we have. We cannot do that. But there's with the current solutions that are out there, we can certainly consider getting there in time.
Annemie.
Yeah, maybe I can just add, because we're, of course, it's a cost, and if you see it as a platform and you need to provide all different languages, like say 150 languages, then it's a huge cost. If you see it as a distributor for a certain territory, it's not what is the hugest cost of your marketing. I mean, it's even if you see it, it's like minor. It's so important, but it's minor. And yeah, well, I think no, I mean, for a platform, of course, if you need to provide all the languages, then it's a lot. But territory by territory, it's absolutely feasible to do it and affordable to do it, which is not the case for dubbings, because we are talking all the time regarding subtitles. But I think the most cost that you have in children's films, whether it's animation or fiction, they need to be dubbed. Well, in our countries, we dub until approximately 8 years. And there you cannot do it by technology. I mean, I cannot imagine that you have a dub that says, "Hello, I am Teresa." I mean, this doesn't work. So you read there, of course, I can imagine that new technologies will go further than this, but we are not yet there. So we still have that problem of dubbing, that the cost is high, and that it's absolutely we need that to travel. But at the same time, every single territory has its own film when it's dubbed.
Absolutely. And actually, so let's turn to, again, the technological side of it, because the way it goes, of course, now you still have like this type of robotic voice when it comes to dubbing. So it's not really effective and efficient when it comes to pure, genuine, authentic interpretation. And for, like core, actually, content purposes, it's not really a solution you can opt for. But still, maybe in the near future, you're going to have more like seamless type of voices that will be able to actually mix and match or make it more blending, the speech to text type of question. Martin, do you have any take on this, or have you been curating or looking for? Oh no, I'm sorry, not speech to text. I mean the opposite way, actually.
Synthetic
text to speech. Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
It's even more controversial, but I think for the blind out there, having the choice between nothing or a pretty good audio described yet synthetic voice, the people that rely on audio description, they've been using synthetic voices for a long time, and for them it's not a showstopper. At the contrary. So I think there again, it's the psychology that we'll need to overcome. Hard to predict when we as not impaired will accept the synthetic voice as being quite natural, but at the same time in car systems, in home control systems, it's happening already.
Yes, it's definitely a question of accessibility for a very specific part of the audience. And actually, we're seeing this happening a lot on different industries and markets when it comes to technology, but sometimes you can actually have one technology implying to one very specific type of consumers or users and turn it into success for other features or other type of ways to actually use it. So it's definitely the way you think text-to-speech is going to go?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, that was a real fast answer, but Annemiek developed on this.
So, okay, I accept that in 10 years' time, everyone will accept it. But for me, it doesn't, it will lower costs, definitely. But it doesn't mean that our European audiovisual works will travel better, because we will still need people to curate. Because it's not because there are thousands of films out there that people find them. So we will need some platform to curate it.
Let me actually free everyone in this audience and on this stage from this type of question where I feel where you just try to turn this into a human versus technology type of question. It's not. The future is definitely blending and mix and matching human and technology per se. So if you guys think that AI is going to take on your job, it is not what we're trying to do here. This is definitely not the position we're trying to have here, guys. We're trying to explore solutions. And I get that. If you actually want to if you actually want to share a reaction with us, just wait for the mic that is coming.
I'm sorry for being too hasty, but still, if you're saying that this is the future to go, as we have just heard again, the entire film forum here is to make European films travel better and wider. And this is not to be done with the technological solutions that are being presented. It simply won't work. If we are talking about film art, European art house films, European art films, cinematographic pieces of art, then technology won't be helping.
Why?
Because art is created by human beings and it has to be treated by human beings in order to be acknowledged. Just remember all that you were talking about in the previous talks about content, about everything that has to be taken into consideration and to be delivered justfully, rightfully.
Okay, I don't want to play the devil's advocate here because we have great panelists who are actually facing those challenges every single day. But ma'am, please just remind me, we're both, content consumer at the same time. We are content creators also. And just think about the way you're actually consuming content right now. Just try to understand that we're definitely in a battle for producing and creating and distributing better content, just at a time where you have an industry in the US, you have an industry in Asia and China, which are already using this type of technologies, and mix and matching again the human factor and the technological factor. So we're just here to share experiences and solutions and try to weigh the pros and cons on how to use them better so that we can actually still, for the sake of reaching wider, younger, and various audiences. You don't reach those audiences, you don't have to produce content anymore. That's just what I'm saying.
Sorry to interrupt. I just want to address this point. We've actually developed some technology with European Union support, which is based on metadata. Now, I totally understand what the lady's saying. I couldn't agree more. It's around curation and finding films that you're passionate about and are similar. But where technology can help is to enable that process to be done more effectively. Through understanding the content more effectively with technology, then the human creator can better link and better curate and better recommend that content. So Netflix is not great. They make a lot of mistakes with this. But technology can help to enable that curation to be done better. So I totally agree with you. But technology is a very powerful solution because at the moment, we're drowning in content. European content is being drowned out. The only way that we're going to make it better known is by making it easier to find it, understand it, curate it, and recommend it. And that is where technology comes in helpful.
Thank you very much for sharing this reaction. Now, if we can just bring it back to the panelists right here on the stage, I would really love to have their reaction to what's just happening right here, right now. I mean, it's definitely this battle. Again, the one which we were trying to prevent from happening is actually happening right now live. So what do we have to say to this? Maureen.
Can I just put bluntly some numbers to try to have it a more objective discussion?
Sure.
That huge American company, which has been mentioned a couple of times, just pushed the price for a translated subtitle significantly below €10 per minute. Now that's a shame. You can't do an honorable job at a price point of €6 or €7 per minute anymore. I'm not pushing the technology, but if we can shave off 20 to 40% of the manual work, at least for the timing templates, etc., and you can start from that result and finish it with all creativity required and still have a proper margin, then I think it makes sense, doesn't it?
Exactly. Thank you so much. Miriam, you wanted to share also another solution with us.
I only wanted to add that we're basically all in the same boat. We do have a subtitling department at ZDF Digital, and I do care about the jobs of my colleagues. And if we don't try to innovate and let the machine do jobs that are totally dumb, if we don't hurry up, we can close our subtitling department in 2 years. And this would be a shame because it's a question of pricing. I don't know who you are working with, but we are struggling. And if we don't do innovation now and at least try to innovate and it's going to be done anyway. So I prefer that we do it in a proper way, in a decent way, and in a way that we take the human into consideration instead of just letting it be done somewhere else overseas.
Thank you very much for this reaction. Let's take another question from the audience. There you go.
Yes, I'm not a translator, I'm not a content creator or producer, but I'm a very active visitor of the European Film Forum over several countries. So I think we meet here in the forum to maybe not talk about, I'm constantly hearing the pricing is going lower and going lower. We are meeting with European politicians, and maybe we can mention that there must be a regulation that the prices are not allowed to go lower, that we have to not struggle and fight for, or there must be intelligence attached heavily, because otherwise it won't work any longer. Why we are not fighting for, let's meet up and team up all together and fight for proper payment and proper amounts and regulations in the budgets, that they have to rise. We are constantly fighting against the always getting lower and lower budgets and saying, and these kind of budgets, I can't do it differently. Why we're not fighting for getting the budget more up again?
Okay. From the various perspectives we have here on this panel, would relying on or reaching out to regulation would be a solution there?
As a producer, I can only say, yes, of course we want to fight for bigger budgets, but we need to finance them.
That was one answer. Wants to give it a try? Federico?
Yeah, that's difficult. I don't see it as viable for all. I mean, that would only help if you like European films. It would still not apply for any other films that are non-European. So how would, I mean, that might be only helping a specific film, or actually limiting it, because maybe companies say, well, I didn't get this funding, so I won't generate this subtitle at this price, in which case the film would likely not be subtitled.
That's market rules, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, I'm not. I really don't know there, like, if it would work or not.
Yeah, well, the European film business is financed through public funds, most of it. So that means the taxpayer pays for it. The higher you ask, the higher the budgets go, and the more difficult it is to finance them. That's reality.
Let's get another question here on the background. We haven't been actually trying to tackling this part of the room. I'm just looking for. Can someone? No, I really want to give the floor to the other side just for a second, so that we can have it. Ola, my gosh, that's live. Okay, let's take this one, and we'll get back to you, ma'am, in a few.
Hi, I run a film subtitling company, so maybe I can give you a perspective from the industry, translation industry point of view. I think that maybe there are a couple of things I would highlight. First thing that has been said, but probably not enough, is that technology is definitely helping a lot, but it's very different translating news and from translating cultural content or artistic content like a film. So we can't even imagine of ever reach a point where we can translate a film without human intervention. Definitely, in my opinion, a film translator will become more an editor, and he will be put in the position to translate more, to subtitle more, and thanks to technology, but it will be always involved, at least in the artistic content audiovisual translation field. I think that information content is rather different. But the point here, and that's really sad from the Commission, I would say costs are not the problem here. The problem is how the industry is structured. There are researchers showing that 60% of the revenues of a film comes from market that receive that film in the foreign languages, but the cost of the foreigner versions are probably 0.5% of the general cost of the audiovisual content. So probably here there's something that can You may think this is valuable, but that means that translators are put in a very bad position. They subtitle a film in a couple of days. They don't have any contact with the creative team, and you are asking here to go lower and lower with fees. That's really wrong. I think that we should think of putting translation from inception to making filmmakers aware of what translation means, and they should know that subtitling a film or dubbing a film in some ways limit the way the audience can follow a film. So if filmmakers know, and in this way, let me just follow with this, there is a notion that is, or a concept that has been promoted recently in a number of universities, particularly in the UK. It's called accessible filmmaking, and that they try to train filmmakers also of the problem of translation and accessibility, trying to make them aware that if they are editing their film in a certain way, 50% of the audiences won't be able to catch something particularly in the image. And so probably we should think to change this model, and maybe thinking of reducing cost is not the right way, also because we are talking a lot about cultural identity, European cultural identity. If you want to transfer this cultural identity, we have to be aware that that localization should be done in a way that allows you to really catch the cultural identity.
Thanks for sharing your thoughts. Do you guys want to follow up on this outsource solution? Not really. Sorry? Do you want to guys follow up on this solution and experience sharing? Not really? Okay, let's take the other question though. We have one question here at the back. I really promise this young woman here to take her question first.
Thank you. My name is Sina Divisa, and we haven't been funded by the EU, but maybe this year. I want to suggest something maybe which would sound like good news, which combines actual translation by human beings and adding value to these translations, subtitles, or dubbings by making it accessible not only to people with sight or hearing loss, but also to international audiences across Europe. That means our technology offers to make subtitles, for instance, French subtitles, accessible not only in the French market or in the German market, but in the whole of Europe. And this is for all languages in all of Europe. And by making this accessible, people, for me, for instance, if I travel to France and I would download German subtitles, I could pay for the subtitles because I want to access the French cinema. And so in this way, we could all together enhance the value of translations and subtitles. And also with this database, this could be a synergy to use subtitles, professional subtitles, for cinema viewers all over Europe and also later in the television market. From my experience, sometimes there are problems with subtitles which exist already in the cinema release, and then this television broadcasting company doesn't use them. They generate their own subtitles, which is good for translators, and I like this idea, but I think we should shift our approach to build new synergies and new usage of these valuable subtitles and language diversity we have in Europe, and to make them accessible everywhere. What do you think about this idea?
Thank you very much. Well, actually, from your perspective, would be something we could add to the European Film Database platform that, the European Commission and the media program are trying to put together, and they've been able to do this over the past 8 months. The subtitle information about how many subtitles or how many translations or dubbing are available for one content, could we actually use it and add it to the platform? I'm not sure I'm making myself clear here. Okay, anyways, we'll probably have this discussion later on with the takeaways that we can have from this session. Anyways, do you want to react to the solution, or are we moving on to another question? Okay, let's move on to another question.
The only thing that I maybe can add to that is that, as I earlier said, in Europe it's very difficult to do that since we have the territoriality where distributors invest, private investment in productions. So far still they do, although it gets lower and lower because there is no business model anymore. But they have their territory with the specific language, so they own, in a way, the territory, and they try to have a very good strategy to get the film out there in cinemas, in theaters, and in televisions as well, whatever, platforms, whatever. So it's, it has two faces. Of course, we all want to get on and we all want to move on, and we see maybe we try to get in the future, but we still have a territoriality-based production scheme that with whom we try to finance all the cultural films that we try to have out there.
Thank you very much for this explanation. So we do have a question over there with the mic.
Yes. Ramin Talbo-Brandling, I'm a writer-director, and I just talk about a feature film and, let's say, a high-quality series. But my question is, and I'd like to pick on what the colleague with the subtitle company said. Have you considered the limitations of subtitles? Because that's a main issue we encounter again and again, that you cannot transport everything that is said with the speed when you're reading it and at the same time watching the movie. So we reduce things. It's not just talking about scripts where you have Eddie Murphy speed or 3 people interrupting each other. It's also in every script that there are things you have to consider to make it subtitleable or not. And from my point of view, subtitling is let's say, art by itself. And we should not talk about machine translation. We should not talk about costs. It is so crucial that when you submit your work to a festival or elsewhere, and the people just don't get it because the subtitles don't transport the meaning, that what you want to say, sufficiently. So I've seen some projects fail on that, and therefore I'm really surprised that you are talking about machine translating and tariffs and stuff like that. That should be really done in close connection with the filmmaker who wants to transport a message, and it's an art by itself.
Any thoughts on that, Martin? I do understand that, of course, you have to weigh the pros and cons of the subtitleability. I don't know how to make it, though, about a content in a movie.
Sure. Now there is a comment. I totally agree with your point of view. Yet we have a couple of film festivals as customers with a simple message. Without technology, it's simply not accessible. So at least we can do some screenings, maybe not the entire movie, but just take the first 15 minutes, that we have at least an impression, take it to a next stage, and from there on we can decide what to do further. But it's not a black or white type of decision we have to take. There is use cases in between, and then hopefully they will be selected and they can be subject to further treatment.
Thank you very much. We do have another question, but I don't know. Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, thanks.
Hi, Cantarian. So I totally agree with my colleagues, and I just want to have an observation. So, so this is. Translating is not, we need a mind shift. Translating is not an automate skill, it is a creative skill, artistic skill. And I don't think we can stop, actually, the technology. It's already probably going to take over. Somebody said in 2 years, more or less, maybe longer, it takes longer. And maybe we need a debate, and what will the future bring? How is going to change our work? What is going to be in the future what does it mean to be a translator in the future? How is it going to be?
And I guess, thank you so much for sharing this thoughts with us, but I think it's definitely what we're actually trying to do here with various and diverse different part of, stakeholders in the value chain and in the industry to try to understand better the future, or what the future holds actually when it comes to this very interesting question of language as enemy.
Well, I totally agree that you cannot stop the evolution of what is going on. We could also say, oh my God, it was better when we were 10 years ago, then at least as distributor, everything was clear, no problems, everyone had still DVD, it was a booming business, wow, wow, wow. Today we face that things are changing, and I think it's wiser to have a look at what is changing, to ask yourself, what is my role and how can I have a role in that? And I think as a translator, being born in Belgium, where we have a minor language, we are obliged to speak other languages, otherwise you stay in your little bubble and you never go anywhere. So I do understand very well, and I moved a lot when I was small. I lived in 28 different places all over in France, Belgium, Holland, and Germany, Spain. Anyhow, doesn't matter. I do understand very well the different languages and what it helps and what the differences are and what the feeling is of a language. This said, there is a technology, and when you say that they should go hand in hand, I do really think that we need humans who understands the language and who can turn what is going on technology-wise, who is getting that technology even further. So I think there will be still a future for people who translate and who feel, and in my opinion, I think it's not for next year that everything will be technology, but I think it should be go hand by hand.
Federico?
I've seen, actually I'm a software developer, so obviously I find this problem quite often. The company I work for is Mubi, and the main business that Mubi has is curation. So we're a video streaming service, but what we're selling is curation. And when I joined 6 years ago, or 7 almost, programmers who could pick the film of the day every day were quite skeptical of algorithms helping them pick the films that they needed to pick. It took us about 2 years to finally work together, and I think the outcome is always much better. There's no algorithm picking the film, but there's a pre-selection done by the algorithm that helps them find and process a list that would otherwise be impossible for them to process. I think here it's a similar thing. As a company that is showing these films, we have a catalog of films that is not humanly translatable by the same person and not affordable. And the only way, at least I can see that happening, is technology helping solve that problem. But it won't be that, I don't foresee in any near future, neither 2 years, nor 3 years, nor 5 years, translations being fully done by a system and no translator doing the translation. The solution we picked to begin with was not an automated one. We picked a human-based one, translators doing the translations. The result is that it's not scalable. So I think only by mixing technology there is how you're going to get it fixed.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's pick one final question from the audience. Do we have anyone on this side? I'm not sure. I do see this one, but I want to make sure that I'm not forgetting anyone on this side. We do have a question here, and we'll get back to you in a few.
Hello, Ingeborg Degner of the Creative Europe desk in Munich. It's more a comment than a question. I thought it was very interesting how through, in the course of the discussion, it came out that it's not only the the fear of translators fearing for their job because they're being replaced by machines, but also the ready availability of subtitled versions which are out there, and you don't know who will be able to use them because it's so much easier to produce them, may be a threat to territoriality as we know it, and how it's still the basis of our film financing system. And I was thinking of something a documentary filmmaker told me a couple of weeks ago, who's a very experienced documentary filmmaker, one of those whom we, Creative Europe Desk, are proud of, because, you know, they're the ones who learned to keep, to hold on to their rights, you know, to not sell everything to their home broadcaster and then have revenues from all over the world. And she said, yeah, Arte is their main co-producer, and through their German Arte channel, it happened that suddenly their documentary was out there in all subtitled versions when only the German-speaking and French-speaking territories had been sold to Arte. And as a small independent filmmaker, they cannot really be the troublemaker who then says, we need compensation. But of course they had been counting on their films selling to South America, and that was no longer possible. And this just as an example of things that will be popping up in the coming years and that we have to keep in mind in this transition period. So I think today's debate was a small stone in this big puzzle, and we're far from having a solution that fits everybody and that will bring a smooth transition for everybody. Sorry, that was not a question.
No, but that was a perfect takeaway, actually, of what happened over the past 50 minutes on this stage. Okay, very final question with you, sir, because you've been like raising your hand for a while now.
Thank you very much. My name is Jean-François Cornu. I'm one of those members of this endangered species that are human translators. And I don't intend to become a post-editor. It's not interesting. There's no creativity in that. It takes more time than to translate from scratch. But I would like to react, or to make sure I heard properly what you said about what you did at ZDF Digital. If I'm not mistaken, you mentioned that you couldn't provide a French to Finnish translation through your machine translation system.
Yeah,
is that right?
It was only
sorry, I can't hear you.
It was only a fictional example. I wasn't really focusing on one production because, as I said, also we are trying out German, French, Swedish, and English.
Okay, but you said you were ready to use English as a relay language, or you would be ready to do that. Yeah. Well, it's ethically wrong to start with, and if you ask us, that we are a number here representing our national associations of audiovisual translators, I'm sure you will find a human translator being able to translate from French into Finnish. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for sharing this experience, but I guess that actually Miriam is just trying, again, to share with you guys the solution they've been experimenting here at the DF Digital. So again, don't shoot the messengers. We're just, again, what we've been trying to do this entire afternoon long, and this was, again, the perfect way, ma'am, to sum it up, I mean, was just to try to put together, bring together, share with you some thoughts, solutions over this really battleground type of debate we have over subtitling, dubbing, and the real question on how we can turn the language question for European work into a really great driver for our works to travel. That's it. And the solution, again, is not like grave or, marked in the stone or whatsoever. Probably the solution in the near future is a mix and match and blending of everything we've been able to share with you today. So thanks for actually reacting to this debate. Thanks for your thoughts and solutions. Thank you so much, guys, for, stepping up on stage with me. I guess they deserve some applause because they've been in the outfit for over an hour now. And without further ado, you're definitely released from duty on this stage. Thank you so much again, guys.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You're very welcome. Thank you so much.
And that brings us to the conclusive part of this session of the European Film Forum. I'm very happy to welcome on this very stage June Laurie Kingston. June, you're the head of units for accessibility, multilingualism, and safer internet at DG Connect. So what are your takeaways from this fierce debate?
Well, ladies and gentlemen, Marjorie and all our panelists, first of all, thank you for letting me have the pleasure and the challenge of these closing remarks. I'd like to thank all the panelists, and I think Marjorie especially deserves a round of applause for her excellent moderation this afternoon. Because it's really been a fascinating discussion, and thanks to you too for making it such a lively and enlightening debate. We can feel there's a lot of passion in the room, and it's really fascinating for me, and here I confess, and you can start throwing the tomatoes now, the translators, because within multilingualism, I am responsible for this famous e-translation tool, and for some of these things that do let us have neural machine translations from French to Romanian and Finnish and whatever now. But I'd like to start by saying I think however much we have discussed and had divergent opinions, there are clearly things we all agree on. As we heard from Commissioner Gabriel at the very start, we have a common problem, and we all agree on that. We will have, 18,000 films in this audiovisual observatory, and they do not travel. They do not travel in the same way as American films do. Why is that? And that's the problem we want to tackle. 2 to 3 countries on average compared to whatever it is, 6 to 8 for American films. We're all working to overcome that in our different ways. And we have a core objective, and that is a core objective from the Creative Europe Media Programme, that really was one of the things we wanted to illustrate this afternoon, is that making those European works travel is in everyone's interests. The tools we have at the moment, whatever their merits, and subtitling has challenges, dubbing has challenges, they all have limits, but they're the tools we've got. Dubbing, subtitling. We don't have anything else. How can we make that as cost-effective, because cost plays a part for those who've got to produce the content and make their money from it afterwards? And also, how can we make that as high quality as possible? And surely in there, certainly speaking as a representative of DG Connect, it would be irresponsible for us not to look at how digitization of the economy and society, the tools we have there, can play their part in helping us make this into a win-win, rather than the sort of blocked problem situation that we are at the moment. There are lots of other questions, obviously, we've heard about, and there will not be a one-size-fits-all. The same as we haven't had a one type of stakeholder or one type of product being discussed this afternoon. We've had questions about AI against human, against English-only subtitles for the future. Heaven forbid, I would say, as an English native speaker. The impact that would have then on territoriality, as we heard from the gentleman here, or the lady here, talking about these wild subtitling versions of a documentary that was suddenly out there, and it was too late, and no one knew who'd done it. We've also heard the really interesting question of the animation sector. Was it Christine who talked about how there they start with parallel scripts, translation from the beginning, so they know where they're going with their market, they have to have dubbing, and that in itself is an enriching way of working on things, with the language from the start. And perhaps that's something that's all to take away from us, that actually we need to put more thought into the language aspect of our works, because having this in a rushed post-production period where you've got 2 days to subtitle something that deserves a lot more careful thought is not the optimum way to work, even if it's how it ends up being in practice all too often. We've seen that there's an appetite for subtitling. We've heard the great success story of my brilliant friend and the young Pope, and that if we get the language aspect right, then actually the sky's the limit, the world's the limit. We can have a really, really good outreach with European film that shares our values, which is something we also really want to achieve, and also, as we've heard, can actually address questions of sort of universal design from language, from making films and our cultural works actually accessible to everyone, whether they're visually impaired, hearing impaired, or need to, have this text-to-speech. There are real opportunities there with artificial intelligence, but also with the real skill and expertise of human translators, who I do not ever think will be replaced completely. So through the media programme, we've supported distributors of European films for many years to dub or subtitle their films. We know it's costly. We know at times it's time-consuming. We know sometimes the technical restraints mean it's not an ideal outcome. But we also know that language technologies are a key part of the digitisation that's radically transforming our economy and our society, and we cannot stick our heads in the sand on that issue. As you've heard, we've launched preparatory actions. We are investing in research through Horizon 2020 on translation tools that are being used in different ways and in very different domains. And it's up to Europe to really stay at the forefront of that. We have huge talent in the language technologies industry here in Europe, but all too often they are then headhunted to go and work either in Asia or America. And investing in that side of our industries is also a future for us and for Europe. So facilitating access to language resources is something my unit is investing in, especially for languages which are underrepresented in the digital environment, can surely only help our mutual comprehension. These cultural values that we heard our first two political speakers talking about, and how important that is for achieving a Europe that really is united in its diversity. We've heard from ZDF how technical developments in their artificial intelligence and data technologies can make automatic subtitling or partially automated subtitling and machine translation of subtitles more efficient, more cost-effective. But there are more synergies, I'm sure, out there, and those technologies are going to take us off in other ways that we haven't even dreamt of at the moment. The pay-per-view, for example, with subtitling. Really interesting idea that I'm glad was shared with us this afternoon. There are benefits there, I am sure, for filmmakers and audiences alike. Improving audiences' experiences, increasing accessibility of audiovisual content, and enabling content producers to reach beyond their national audiences. If we think beyond those national borders from the outset, choosing appropriate times and means and methods to achieve this, we can reach audiences of potentially any language in Europe and beyond. And by doing that, we share great works, but also share our cultural values. So, if I may, to quote from the end of Himmel in Berlin, nous sommes embarqués for an adventure, a linguistic adventure in for us, and I would now like to invite you to embarquer for a well-deserved drink and a cocktail outside. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, June. And that's, of course, the end of our session here at Berlinale. It's been a pleasure to be with you and share, real thoughts. Thank you very much again.
If you're letting me in or letting me go, don't lie. When you're hurting inside, you can't escape my private eyes. They're watching you.
Still not. And if you guys had to pick up some headphones for translation purposes, could you please just put them back in the cases at the very bottom of the room or something? Thank you so much.